Hello, you absolute legends, and welcome back. Today we're diving into the chaos of the intensifying trade war between the United States and France. This feud has everything: tariffs, counter-tariffs, and enough economic jargon to make your head spin. We're breaking down the key factors fueling this showdown, from France's fiery counterpunch to the ripple effects shaking the auto industry. Buckle up, because this isn't some mild diplomatic squabble. This is a full-scale gloves-off trade war. Picture this. Two of the world's biggest economies rolling around in the economic mud, throwing tariffs at each other. It's like watching a playground fight, but instead of spitballs, it's billions of dollars in import taxes. And nobody wins in this scenario, except maybe the lawyers drafting all these trade agreements. Oh, and speaking of agreements, good luck understanding those. They're about as clear as a politician's promise during an election year. Our story begins with a seemingly innocuous decision that quickly spiraled into an international incident. It's early 2025, the birds are singing, the sun is shining, and then BAM! The Trump administration decided to slap a hefty 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum. These tariffs weren't just aimed at any random country, they were aimed squarely at some of America's closest allies, including France. The French government, led by President Macron, saw this tariff not just as an attack on their economy, but as a personal affront to their national pride. The Trump administration argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and national security. But the reality was far more complicated. These tariffs, while ostensibly designed to protect American jobs, actually ended up hurting American businesses and consumers. When you make imported goods more expensive, the price of everything goes up. American businesses were faced with the impossible choice of either absorbing these increased costs or passing them on to consumers. And let's be honest, we all know which option they chose. The French didn't just roll over and accept these tariffs lying down. They responded with a resounding none that echoed across the Atlantic. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot called the US tariffs illegal and unjustified, adding that France would not hesitate to retaliate. And retaliate they did, imposing tariffs on a range of American goods, from bourbon whiskey to motorcycles. Suddenly, American bourbon was about as affordable as a trip to Disneyland, and Harley-Davidson motorcycles were gathering dust in showrooms across France. But the French weren't done there. They threatened to challenge the US tariffs at the World Trade Organization. This was a bold move, sending a clear message to the Trump administration. You want to play dirty? Fine. But we're playing by the rules, and we're bringing the entire world to watch. The Trump administration dismissed France's threats, but behind the bluster there was a growing sense of unease. While this trade war was entertaining from a geopolitical standpoint, it was having real consequences for businesses and consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. Nowhere were these consequences felt more acutely than in the auto industry. With tariffs driving up the price of steel and aluminum, the cost of producing cars skyrocketed. American automakers, already grappling with declining sales and rising labor costs, were caught in a perfect storm. They were forced to either raise prices or absorb the increased costs, squeezing their already thin profit margins. The French, masters of retaliation, slapped tariffs on imported American cars. Suddenly, American cars in France were about as popular as a skunk at a garden party. Sales plummeted, dealerships closed, and the American auto industry was left reeling. France plays 3D chess, strategic alliances, and economic jiu-jitsu. While the US was busy engaging in its trade war with France, the French were playing a much more strategic game. The French recognized that in the interconnected world of global trade, isolation is not a winning strategy. So while the US was busy building walls, the French were building bridges, strengthening their economic ties with other countries, most notably China. China, with its massive population and rapidly growing economy, was more than happy to welcome France with open arms. The two countries signed a series of trade deals, covering everything from agriculture to technology, effectively bypassing the US and its tariffs. But France wasn't just focused on China. They were also busy strengthening their ties with other countries in Asia, Africa, and South America. They understood that in the 21st century, economic power comes not from dominance but from collaboration and diversification. The French, with their long history of diplomacy and global engagement, were uniquely positioned to thrive in this new multipolar world. Other countries, seeing the writing on the wall, began to follow suit, diversifying their own trade partnerships and reducing their reliance on the US. European auto industry from autobahn to roadblock. As the trade war between the United States and France dragged on, the European auto industry began to sputter. The tariffs, combined with the uncertainty created by the trade war, had thrown the industry into disarray. Supply chains were disrupted, production schedules were thrown into chaos, and investment dried up. German automakers in particular were hit hard. Germany, home to giants like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, is heavily reliant on exports, particularly to the United States and China. With the trade war creating uncertainty in both of these crucial markets, the German auto industry was caught in a pincer movement. Thousands of small and medium-sized businesses, from parts suppliers to dealerships, were also struggling to stay afloat. Jobs were lost, businesses closed, and the economic anxiety began to boil over. The EU stands firm, a united front against Trump's trade tirades. Despite the pressure, the European Union, led by French President Emmanuel Macron, held firm. They recognized that in the face of Trump's aggressive trade policies, a divided Europe would be a vulnerable Europe. The EU presented a united front, imposing retaliatory tariffs of their own on a range of American goods, from orange juice to peanut butter. But the EU's strategy went beyond just tariffs. They launched a charm offensive, engaging in diplomatic outreach to countries around the world, emphasizing the importance of multilateralism, free trade, and a rules-based international order. This message resonated particularly with countries that had borne the brunt of Trump's unilateralism and protectionism. The EU, once seen as a bureaucratic behemoth, was emerging as an unlikely champion of free trade and global cooperation. The Trump administration, caught off guard by the EU's unified response, found itself increasingly isolated on the world stage. France's global gambit from trade war to trade triumph. While the United States was busy picking fights with its allies, France was busy building bridges, expanding its economic horizons beyond the traditional confines of the West. They understood that the future of global trade lay in the dynamic and rapidly growing economies of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. French businesses, with the support of the French government, were investing heavily in these emerging markets, building factories, creating jobs, and forging lasting partnerships. They were determined to be architects of a new, more equitable and sustainable global economic order. France's global gambit was paying off. They were emerging as a key player in the global south, a trusted partner and a reliable investor. The United States, meanwhile, risked being left behind, clinging to an outdated model of global trade. Trade wars, the aftermath. So there you have it, the United States and France locked in an epic trade war that could give even the most seasoned economists heart palpitations. It's a tale of tariffs, tantrums, and enough economic jargon to make your head spin. But beyond the headlines and the political posturing, this trade war reveals a fundamental truth about the world we live in today. The old rules no longer apply. Can these two economic giants find a way to reconcile before the global economy spirals into chaos, or are we entering a new era where trade wars are just part of everyday life? This isn't a simple case of right and wrong, of heroes and villains. It's a complex web of interconnected interests, competing priorities, and let's be honest, a healthy dose of ego. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and for goodness sake, try to avoid getting caught in the crossfire of a trade war.